Ooh, fancy. Um, Hi, everybody. Welcome to the now seasonal coaches meeting for Return to Play. So with that being said, like I mentioned in the reminder email, we're going to talk, the majority of it is going to be about our outdoor sports season. I do want to reserve some time for some questions. I know with some swim meets coming up here soon, as well as the state meets coming up. I know that there's some people who have questions on those, and hopefully I have some answers or at least some general ideas for some people on some of those things. But I do want to take time during the meeting to talk about our outdoor sports season. And then when we're done talking about outdoor sports season and some of our programming over the summer, then we can go back and I'll open up for questions about some of the current events that we have going on right now. Just for the respect for those who are jumping on, softball coaches, t-ball coaches, bocce coaches, that are tennis coaches that are specific to that season. So I'll just put it out there for that way. And then we'll get going as far as the meeting. So what I always like to start off with, and I think I pulled it up perfect, is just to get a general picture of where we are according to our numbers in our burden map. So the good news is, I think since last time we met a few weeks ago, the numbers have started to dip down again, which is a positive thing for us as we're moving forward. With the statewide burden being at 102. So as how that affects our upcoming events, for outdoor events, in order for us to host an outdoor event, would have to be in phase 2 for both the host and where the agency is traveling from. And so phase 2 for outdoor, reminder, is at 350. So anything below 350, which is, if you start scrolling around the map, I think the majority, so these couple counties up here would not be, but I think majority in this color here would be under 350. For our indoor events, to get to phase 2 would be under 100 in the burden number. And you can see, just scroll through some of these, we're getting a lot of counties that are below 100 at this point, or very close to below 100. So just something to keep monitoring. Again, we're continuing to look at these numbers to make some of these decisions on events, but we seem to be in a lot better spot than we were even heading into our track events and all that. So just a website, again, it's on our Return to Play website. I think I'm making notes, as I'll send out the follow-up on this one, but I will include the website on that, just as always. That's just been our driving factor, so we have a black and white answer as far as decisions that we make, and we're not making gut decisions on some of these things. So kind of going from there. So I know we've been receiving a lot of questions about return to play protocols, and how I know we had an announcement from the CDC on May 13th, I believe is the date, that came out about removing restrictions for fully vaccinated individuals. And then we've gotten a lot of questions of how does that affect Special Olympics Wisconsin and how we're proceeding with these things. So what I like to start off with is there's a couple of factors that we have to consider with following our protocols moving forward. We mentioned when the vaccine started to come out, Special Olympics Wisconsin, Special Olympics Incorporated does not require a proof of vaccination or anything like that to participate. And since we do not track that, we also can't necessarily enforce policies based on vaccinated or not vaccinated. So we almost have kind of two conflicting options here. Either we have to treat everybody as fully vaccinated, or we have to treat everybody as not vaccinated, which I know on both sides, there's going to be people who are going to be frustrated with whichever, either we're being too strict or not strict enough. But in order, when you're looking at the big picture of things and you look at the percentage of people in the state that are vaccinated, and also some of our population that we serve not being able to get the vaccine, some with health conditions that would not allow that, or some that are under the age of 12. We've erred towards the side of keeping some of the restrictions at this point. And the other factor about that is, as we look at our venues are slow to remove their protocols. We had a walkthrough with Carthage College for our state swim meet, and they were very still much had everything in place as far as our COVID protocols. Universities are very slow to come back on those things, knowing that it's a small ecosystem for their students. And so we have to be respectful of that as we're using those venues for not only our state events, but we also have our upcoming UW Stevens Point swim meet So there's some factors that we're considering as we're going through these things of why we're making decisions that we are, but we also understand that the CDC announcement does allow us to change, take a good look at our protocols and what's still effective and what might need to be changed in some of those things. So there's a little bit of a middle ground here. So I just wanted to preface that for those who may have been coming on, and we've gotten questions of that now that the announcement's been out there. So now we don't need to wear masks at events or at practices. I just want to set the expectation of why we've made these decisions kind of moving forward on those. So the first part about this is one that we've been asked about for softball, and based on some of the information that we found, we're going to be removing the language about direct and indirect contact for phase one, just because we've found through the information that COVID tends to be spread less through contact and more through droplets and all that. So where we've had restrictions in phase one of no direct contact, we're actually going to remove that restriction from phase one. So those teams that are starting softball in phase one and we're having issues about not throwing the ball to each other or not throwing the ball to a coach, that restriction's been lifted for phase one. And all of this stuff is effective immediately. We're just working on getting the updated paperwork out, and we'll send that early next week. So we have practices coming up this weekend. That's part of that for phase one. So for mask requirements, generally at practices and at events, we are still having a mask requirement for participants. What we've changed is for three of the four outdoor sports, season sports, during competition when you're in the playing field, you would not need to be wearing a mask during tennis, softball, and t-ball. Part of those things have been because of cardiovascular activity. Again, tennis being an individual sport that's played like a team sport, you're in cardiovascular activity. And then also between softball, t-ball, and tennis, there's plenty of availability for social distancing and minimal contact and all of that type of stuff. The mask requirement's still in place for bocce, and that's just mainly because of the way bocce is structured and the team's close proximity and things. So at events, general walking around prior to not competing, mask will be worn. On the playing field for softball, t-ball, and tennis, they will have the opportunity to not wear it. I know we have gave that opportunity for some of our track athletes, and they still chose to wear the mask. So that's always an option for them, but just giving that option to pull it down while in the playing field. I'll clarify for softball and t-ball that we would ask that then they would replace the mask when they get to the dugout while they're waiting to at bat or between innings in the field and that type of stuff. So. Oh, I apologize. Nicole, you mentioned golf too. Golf is in that weird spot kind of between OST and fall sports, but it is falling to outdoor sports. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And Nicole, do you want to, I guess, typically for golf, so hold on. So golf previously being outdoors and social distancing, I think we still had a mask requirement during golf last year, but obviously it's a little bit of a different practice structure than your team stuff. So I know, Nicole, if you want to touch base on something specific.
Yeah, I would say it's probably more similar to tennis, right? Where if you are not in the cart with somebody, if you're going up to hit the ball, you can take your mask off, but while you're in a cart or with any teammates, you should probably keep it
on. Yeah. And then back to softball. Masks, yes, in the dugout, no while batting. Batting, you're in the playing field, so that includes when you go up to a bat. I would even you would have somebody at bat, somebody in the waiting on deck would be fine without the mask on. It'd be just when they return back to the dugout that we asked that they would put the mask back in. So it in the playing field includes any of the spots in playing in the actual field itself there. The other thing that we would like to introduce back for our outdoor sports, and there's a couple of reasons for this, is doing on-site awards for outdoor sports. Part of that is with team sports or the way outdoor sports is played. We have a better availability of knowing what the placing is. Obviously head-to-head games, who finished first, second, third, fourth. typically 3-team divisions kind of throw that off a little bit, but for the most part, we know exactly where the people finish by the time they finish their second game. So availability to give awards out. But what we're going to do instead of having a designated awards area is that we would do awards on the playing field. So that'd be on the softball field or on the bocce court at the completion of the second game or the completion of the division. We would give out our awards there. That way, there's still an opportunity for spectators to see the award ceremony, but we would still be avoiding mass gatherings in a designated award area. So something that we're introducing back in is going to be doing the in-person awards. That would eliminate doing the virtual award ceremonies for those sports. So that would be another piece for that. We've also decided, again, we just recently made an announcement, but as new information comes out, we are changing our protocols. And a lot of this affects, I know, mainly affects our events rather than affecting our practices. But there are some larger agencies where it may affect practices. But we're again going to increase the maximum numbers for phases after phase one. So we bumped phase one previously up from 10 to 15 for indoor and up to 25 for outdoor. Now we are bumping up for phase two for indoor is going to be 100. And for phase two for outdoor is going to be 250. And then for phase three would bump up to 200 for indoor and will be 500 for outdoor. So then again, it's just, again, following the information that comes out, increasing based on what's seen as safe in these type of situations and going from there. And then I guess the last part for the new information is, again, we meet every week. We make decisions based off of new information that comes out. We've been given notice that I believe that Special Olympics Incorporated will be coming out with an updated COVID protocol from their guidance at the end of June. So as we get towards the end of June, we may be able to switch some things up based off their guidance. Currently, the available guidance from Special Olympics Incorporated is from July 2020. So we've been updating ours a little bit more frequently than they have. And so it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for them to be a big change in their protocols. And again, we would follow a lot of that. But I have no indication of what the changes will be. I just know that obviously it's a year in the making to get an update on that. So as that information comes out, we will share it directly to agency managers through the athletic directors. But that's kind of another date just to keep in the back of your mind, as far as there may be some additional information coming out even prior to some of our district competitions. But again, we'll try to keep everybody informed as we make some of these decisions and as new information comes out for that. I also got a question in order to go to competitions, including state, it has to be phase two in order to do that. So phase three would just allow us to expand our events to maybe do less shifting or something like, or less schedulings and shifts or break times between that, where we get back to closer to what a normal event would look like. But phase two is the minimum requirement to get to competition, and that includes state competitions. So thank you for that question, Lydia. So those are the main changes from what we're currently doing there. I know there's some changes in that. Does anybody have any questions specific to those changes? I'll continue to read through the chat here. We'll get to the Caitlin from 407. We're gonna get to spectator here shortly.
Jason, I'll have a question when you get a minute.
Yeah, let me read this one real quick. All right. So the question of, we are in swimming and now spectators are allowed. So we are not changing anything for spectators policy for summer game season. We're keeping that consistent. So that would be outdoor was 2 spectators. And again, that one was initially set by our state track location. For swimming, it's still, there's no spectators allowed at some of our venues. And so we're not changing the spectator thing for in-person competition for swimming. So I just want to make sure that I get that out there. And so and then Mike, did your specific question was it specifically for outdoor sports? Or is there something that we should wait to the end of
No.
the meeting?
I'll wait.
Okay, thank you. Anything else about the changes that we just mentioned? That, like I said, a lot of those changes are immediate, but the spectator policy we're doing on a season to season basis. So I can get to that as our next point here. If that's the question for that. So for spectators, we're going to release the new memo for outdoor sports, but we're remaining at a 2 spectator per athlete maximum at this point. So again, if when we've done check-ins and all that type of stuff, it's not that we're looking to say, hey, I'm with Joe Smith here, but to know what agency you're with, just so we have a general idea that if you had 15 athletes and you have 30 spectators, that we're about where we need to be. We really didn't have too many issues with that at track, so I really do appreciate communicating that with your parents, as well as family supports and all that type of stuff. A lot of this has to do with venue capacity. Again, we're looking at universities and all that type of stuff where the policies are pretty strict. So we're just trying to keep it consistent, so it's consistent across the board from a district event to a state event. And also just to make things manageable, we still have a requirement for spectators where we're going to have them sign in so we get contact tracing information. And also, as we continue to move forward on these things, the communicable disease waiver is still required by anybody who is at the event. And so that includes, obviously it's a little bit easier to track from athletes and coaches as we get those turned in and we put them into our systems. When it comes to day of volunteers and spectators, every single event, they will either need to bring a proof that they filled out that form or the form itself, and we will have forms on site for people to fill out. And it's just because it's going to be unmanageable for us to track that and check it for when people come in. So it's just that unfortunately the onus is going to be on the spectators to bring proof that that form is filled out. When you fill the form out online, you do get a confirmation. So that's just a confirmation email that you want to hold on to. And you can keep bringing to events. You can show it to us on your phone. That's more than fine when you do the check-ins for those type of things. But the communicable disease waiver is not something that we really are excited about enforcing completely. It's just something that's a requirement that comes from SONA and our insurance company as a liability factor side of things. So I know it's not the most convenient for everybody, but I will also pretty contest it's not the most convenient on our end either, but it's something that's required in order for us to host events. And so we will continue with that until we're told that we don't need to do that anymore. And I would assume that's probably going to be one of the last things to be lifted since it's an insurance liability factor side of things. So if you did a paper form, I guess, and asked that question, if you did a paper form and you've turned it in, unfortunately, we're going to probably have you fill out another form the next time we see you. I would recommend if you have a paper form that you want to fill out, to make a copy, or you can take a picture of it in your phone to prove that you've taken it, that you filled out the form, would be the easiest things. There's just not a way for us to pull that up, a paper form while you're at an event if you've done it at a previous event. So I know a lot of spectators have done, the first time they did it was at track, and so hopefully for those who did it online, they've kept that email confirmation. If not, they can fill it out. They'll get another email confirmation, and then they can hold on to that one as we keep going. It's just, there's not really a perfect system for this. We're just trying to make it so it's manageable for everybody as we keep going through this.
Jason,
Yeah.
because the agents, we get the list from Sam. Can you bring that list along when you're going to competition? That would show.
Nope. So what I'm talking about for the proof of that, I don't need those for athletes or coaches because we do track those ones. That's because we have that tracking system that we do for our athletes for medicals. It's the same way we track, and we'll look those up ahead of the time for the event and just let you know if there's anything that we're missing on those. And it's the same with Class A volunteers. That one we track in our Class A system. It's just for people who show up to the day of the event that we're not expecting. That's where we need the proof of the form.
Okay.
So your coaches and your athletes, we don't need a proof of that form. It's just the spectators that we're talking about. And then on our end, it's the day of volunteers that we get that are not our GMT members that we typically.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. That's a good question. Thank you for asking that one. All right. We'll keep monitoring the chat too if people have questions on some of those things. The last piece I just want to mention is there's a couple of things that so OST. We're working on changes. We actually will have one of our first planning meetings for OST coming up in a week and a half or so. So a lot more information is coming out. We're working with the university to try to make this as easy and fun of an event and trying to make it a safe event for our athletes. Similar to state track and state swimming, we're still trying to anticipate to advance about 50% of the teams that participate. That's within our numbers for previous state games, and that's what we're advancing as far as athletes for track and swimming this year. We have the capacity to be able to do that at both Carroll University and Saratoga. But the venue layout may change a little bit. We may have to spread out our bocce courts so they would not all be in the football stadium. We may have some in the football stadium. We may have some in the infield of the track right behind the football stadium. And there's a third field available, again, as we work with the university about what they feel safe and with us doing. We do have a capacity to do all the bocce courts that we need to do. It's just depending on where they might be, and we'll keep that information. And just like similar to every other year, the bocce teams will stay on the same court, so they won't be going from venue to venue. It just may affect your head coach having teams in one venue and another venue on that side of things. All the courts, that's a great question, Christy. All the courts would not be turf. The only turf would be inside the football field on that. And so while that, I know it does change the competition a bit, if you start on a turf field, you'll finish on a turf field. If you start on a grass field, you'll finish on a grass field. So I will say this halfway joking, but I will not be taking requests if your team wants to play on turf or grass, because that's just going to be unmanageable. And I also probably already know most of the answers on those. But you'll stay on the same court, so it's not like game one you'll play on turf and then game two you'll play on grass. You'll be on the same playing surface for both games at state. So that's a good question on that. We are still planning on at this point having softball games both on campus on the field over there as well as on the fields over at Saratoga, which is the majority of the fields are about a mile away. Tennis, for those tennis athletes, I think the rules should be on the website now. If they hadn't been, we had a little delay on that. But tennis will be doing match play at state, as we have done in previous years. We are offering our tennis skills competition as our in-practice competition. So we will be awarding that with medals, as it is a state event. But it will be hosted at your team's practice and not at the state tournament this year. We will work at 2022. I'm trying to remember what year it is now. 2022, we are working on introducing that back into tennis skills back into OST, which was the plan in 2020 when we weren't able to host it. So tennis skills will be in practice. Match play will be in person. One other thing with the tennis type of situation there is that we're going to try to do a pickleball demonstration. Pickleball is part of our senior athletes program, and so it'd be an opportunity for any athlete at the event, not just tennis players or anybody who maybe did not qualify, to be able to try pickleball as an option. It's a very popular sport at a lot of tennis facilities now, especially for athletes who are aging. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to offer as an opportunity at OST, assuming that we have the ability, the time to be able to do that with the tennis players that we have there. So, and then as always, tennis players, since the skills competition is in practice, if you have somebody who is higher end on the skill side of things and would be appropriate to play in match play, they would be able to do both if you would like. If that would be an opportunity, and again, you would be matched division with people with equal abilities on that. The other two things is, and I think this has been announced before, was at Carroll University, regardless of COVID, at Carroll University, we do not have housing this year for those who would want to stay overnight on Friday night. our date is later in the year, so students are actually moving back on campus that weekend, or in some cases can move back on campus that weekend. So we do not have housing on campus that we can provide. I know there's a small amount of agencies who utilize that housing. We are going to look into seeing if we can get some sort of group rate at a hotel nearby, but they won't have housing at for that option as well. And then just from a budget standpoint, we are not offering lunch during that competition, which is kind of unfortunately a standard that we have at some of our state events this year. Something that we're hoping to that we're planning on only just being in 2021, but I just wanted to be clear on that ahead of time before people get out there or before we get people going to state. But we will again provide a list of options in the area for those and try to provide breaks appropriately so people can get lunch if they need to between games. Typically bocce and tennis are done prior to mealtime, but softball is the one that will provide a lunch break somewhere in there or provide some sort of opportunities. Joan had asked about mentioned players touching the same softball. Any changes about touching more than one bocce ball? I guess that falls underneath. We didn't. I guess the change in the protocol wasn't specific to softball. It was just softball is the example, but direct and indirect contact is something that we've just removed from the protocol. So it'd be allowable for multiple people to touch a bocce ball or multiple bocce balls under that policy.
So they're not going to worry about cleaning off the bocce balls every time they go up and down the court then?
So I think we will have an option for it at state. But again, I think it's going to be, it's a little bit less of, we found that's a little bit less of the issue for COVID. So at practice, I would not be as concerned about that if that's a hesitancy for you. Sharon Seekers had asked the bocce skills assessment test, the BOSAT due date. BOSATs are always due with registrations. So that'd be on the registration deadline, which I believe would be for a lot of the tournaments is the last week of June 26th or something like that. 23rd. 26th is a track meet. That's why it's in my head. The 23rd would be your registration deadline for those who have tournaments the first weekend, and that would be where BOSATs would come into play. Kathy, we'll touch base a little bit on some of the non-outdoor sports stuff at the end of this meeting, so we can touch base on that. And then as we get closer to our state games, I was planning on having some sort of coaches meeting for both those events to be able to provide information for that too. So Kathy, I'll get to that a little bit later if we have questions specifically about district events, but we'll definitely address the state events as they come up towards the end of this month. So. And we'll get those out as registrations come in, just so we know we're sending out those. Would be specific to those competing in state events. Would send out a coaches meeting for those. All right. Trying to think, team, if I missed anything on my changes on those type of things for outdoor stuff. And again, we'll be able to touch base more in questions as we go. A regional due date for Joan, which region are you talking about specifically? Because it will depend on the event date for the due date for OST. If you want to take that in. If it's the weekend of the July, was it it's the 10th and the 11th? If that's that weekend, it would be June 23rd as a registration deadline. If a tournament is the following weekend, which is the other possible weekend for that, it would be June 30th. It's always 2.5 weeks for that. So the tournament date for Region 6, the 3-6 competition. We're still trying to get a venue finalized for that. There will be a venue for it. We're just trying to get stuff working on with that. Our previous venue is not available this year. So as that comes out, you guys will be the first to know. We'll have a little quick celebration party on our end, and then we'll send it out to you guys. So you guys will know as soon as that comes out. But it will either be one of those 2 weekends. Those are 2 weekends that we have highlighted. I believe, I don't even want to say if we're targeting any specific dates or whatever it is, because it's going to be based on availability. But it's either going to be the 2nd or 3rd weekend of July. Those are available weekends for district. All right, I'll take a break from questions. I'll keep answering questions after the fact here. But I was going to hand it off to whoever wants, between Brittany and Nicole, wants to talk about our summer fitness competition, our second round of our fitness competition here. So that's next on the agenda.
Yeah, I'll go, Nicole. So I'm going to put the link just to our website in the chat. But first, I want to say that the spring fitness competition was a great success. We had, I believe, 65 participants go from start to finish. So that's awesome. So we decided, let's do it again. So the summer fitness competition will look very similar with just a few minor changes. First, I want to say there's a few different options. So it can be done completely virtually, which means athletes never have to leave their house. They can compete at home and just submit scores that way, whether that's individually or through a coach. It could be done in practice. So if you are getting together in practice, whether it's a specific fitness practice, or if you wanted just to tag it on to whatever sport you're already offering, you could just add in some fitness at the end and collect some scores and turn them in that way. Or it could be done, well, I kind of said two things there. So it could be done as a separate fitness option, or it could be done with your sport. So there's kind of three different ways to do it. This time around, we'll still have 3 different levels like we did in the spring. So hopefully your athletes fall into different intensity or ability levels based on where they're at with their exercises. And then within each level, there's 3 different exercises. I'm not going to go over them specifically tonight. They're all on our website. There's a playbook that has written instructions as well as videos that go along with them. So hopefully that's clear and gives you an idea of what they'll be tested on. Couple key dates that I want to share. First off is the medical deadline, which is just around the corner, June 1st. And then the preseason scores, or that first round of scores, will be due midnight Sunday, June 13th. So you have that first week, June 7th through the 13th, to collect scores, and then they're due to your athletic director by midnight on that Sunday. There's a mid-season score that'll be collected July 5th through the 11th, and again, due then midnight on the 11th. And then the end of season will be collected July 26th through the 1st, due then on the 1st, again, to your athletic directors. We'll division based on those mid-season scores, and then athletes will be awarded based on their end of season. And they're awarded based on their percent improvement. So we're not judging someone who can do 20 push-ups to someone who can do 2. We're judging how much they've improved over time. So it should even out. Because this is a more or less virtual event, there's no in-person competition that we're hosting or in-person tournament. We'll have virtual awards, which will be Tuesday, August 3rd. All this information is up on our website. Like I said, there's a link to where all those key dates are that I just said, as well as the playbook. But if you do have any questions, you can reach out to me, but I will say I will be starting maternity leave anytime from tonight through definitely next Friday is my last day. So Nicole will be our key contact going forward, but you can also always reach out to your athletic director. They know what's going on too. So kind of went through that really fast, but it is all on the website. So take a look, read through it. It's just another fun way, not only to get our athletes involved if they aren't doing a sport already, get them in better shape, hopefully, that's the idea. And who doesn't want another medal or ribbon, because that's always fun. So any questions on some of the things I went over?
Brittany, I'll ask Mike's question, but in a different way. If individuals want to participate, not agencies per se, do we have a system for that as far as individuals or families wanting to register outside?
Yes. So yes, individual athletes can participate. The registration form is on our website. So all you'd have to do is get a hold of that registration form, fill in your scores, and turn them in directly to your athletic director. I guess I forgot to mention, so there's 3 different ways to compete. You can compete as an individual athlete, but there's also traditional doubles, so 2 athletes together, or unified doubles, so an athlete and a unified partner. Just I like the partner option. It's a little bit of accountability to make sure your partner's getting in good shape too. But there are a few different ways to compete that way.
That's kind of why I asked, is because, my agency hasn't opened up. And
Yep, you can do it just like you did in the spring. You can submit your forms to Michaela.
Okay.
And unlike, again, with that being more of a virtual or in practice type event, you are able to do the fitness competition alongside of the other outdoor sports, season sports. So that is, again, you typically have to choose between softball, t-ball, and bocce, and tennis. But fitness challenge and golf you can do separately as well as with some of those events. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have somebody who's interested, you don't have to restrict them if they're doing bocce as well.
Any other questions regarding fitness? I'll still be on the call, so if you think of anything, just type it in the chat. But otherwise, back to you, Jason.
A couple things to follow up on too. I wanted to mention USA Games nominations are open right now for track and swim. A reminder for that, there's a list of events on those. It's a little bit easier to go through for track but than swimming, but the full list of events is, if you, I'll make my note to include it in the follow-up email, but they're available online. Nomination forms are filled out online, and it has the events you can qualify in. The qualifying right now for track and swim are first place at 2018 or 2019 summer games in those events. Thank you, Brittany. And then or a first place finish in those events at this year's district tournament or regional tournament. So those who've competed in track, obviously, this year, if you did receive a first place in the events, and they're all running events, I will put that for track. The field events will get added on for those who qualify, so it'd just be on the running events that we offer. But if I have an athlete who finished first place at regional track and is interested in going to USA Games, that is a qualifying games. Just the idea that knowing that some people are less likely to travel to some of our state competitions, we didn't want to force people to travel when they weren't ready to do that. 1500 meter is included now, since we have two different levels of track athletes that we're bringing, shorter distance and longer distance. So 1500 meter is included for 2018 and 2019. We just obviously did not offer that at regional track this year. So
I participated in the 2018 and 2019. Does that actually qualify me?
First, if you first place finish at those events, and then the new thing this year, again, to recognize is if you hit, there are some minimum time requirements, or I guess it would be more maximum time requirements, if you will. So they have those listed on those forms too. So like, for example, I think a 1500 meter is first place, but then you've also had to run it in 7:45 or less or something like that. Again, that number's about where it's at, but I can't remember, and it differs between male and female athletes. So just keep those in mind. If you have, what we're planning on doing is being helpful is sending out some of the results from those games for those with those forms. So if you have any questions specifically about your agency, you can feel free to reach out to myself or an athletic director. But I believe we are planning on sending out a listing of the places for you, so you can have a chance to know who's qualified and maybe encourage some that would be good for going out to USA Games. So part of that is there. So, and then also as district swim events come up, the qualifying events in those district swim events, if they finish first place at the district event, would qualify them for USA Games. So it would not be the state event again. It would be the district event this year or the state events in 2018 and 2019. So that's going to be that's that for the summer game season. For outdoor sports season, we are bringing bocce and softball. The requirement for those are first place finish at OST in 2018 or 2019 at the state OST, or advancing to state or advancing to state this year. So any teams that advance to state this year, regardless of how they place, will be eligible for USA Games. And that's just because our turnaround for getting applications in and inviting people to camp is pretty tight there with our first camp in September. So Region 4 and 5, I know there was did get brought up that there was a cancellation partially through an event. Oh, I'm trying to remember what year this was, 2019. And so I believe, I'm gonna double check through those things, but I believe what we'd probably end up doing is for teams that had won one game, because I believe we got through half a division. So if teams had won one game, that we'd be able to honor that as a qualifying event from that event, knowing if we're advancing for that. So
Yeah, I think that was 2019 because we had a
Yep.
tornado warning that day.
right. And I know when you have that one's a little bit more flexible, just knowing that it put everybody in the lottery rather than advancing people. So there are some teams that may have qualified that didn't qualify for state and all that. So we'll work on those. That's a really rare event. I don't think we had that with any rainouts for 2018 or 2019 for any other ones. 4 or 5 coaches. If you want to reach out to myself and Kurt, and we'll work with you guys on those nomination forms. You have people interested, but this year is also a nomination for that. So that form is not quite up. We were hoping to have that up in the next couple of weeks. But if you already have athletes who qualify, once those forms come up, nominate them right away. You don't need to wait to see what happens this year, because if you qualify once, you qualify for all of it. So that's fine. And then the other question we always get with that, if an athlete qualifies in multiple events, they can be nominated in multiple events, but come training camp time, the first training camp, they have to choose which sport they would like to be their primary. So if you have somebody who qualifies bowling and track and softball, we will ask them before September camp to choose which sport they will be in, because that affects how we run camps. All right. Any questions about USA Games? That side of things? I'll do a final call for OST questions before I open up for Summer Games questions.
Do you mind covering flag football? There's a question in the chat.
For flag football for USA Games is something different this year, and part of it. So we're bringing a intercollegiate unified team, and so that's run through our UCS type program. And so what we've done with that, based on the recommendation of Special Olympics North America for that team, is we've partnered with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. They run a unified team program for a unified flag football program through their intramural sports. And so we're utilizing their students as well as athletes from that area. Aaron will reach out to the agencies who, there's some really specific things with bringing an interscholastic one, which includes an age range. I believe athletes have to be 30 years old or between 30. I think it's 18 and 30 is the age range that the athletes have to be in, and they have to be in a certain geographical area, and so all that type of stuff. So it's a little bit more complicated than just everything else that we're bringing. For those, I think in Region 6 in the Madison area, that Aaron would reach out to some of the programs that would have athletes that qualify for flag football rather than it being generally out there. And again, this comes from Special Olympics North America for the type of team that we're bringing, that these requirements come from, and we're just trying to find a way to make that work. So flag football is different as far as the requirements go. So Lydia and I would assume that that Aaron would reach out for anybody that qualifies from your program. All right. Any OST questions before we move on? All right. You're just on for, sorry, go ahead.
I got a question for OST.
What is that?
Us Region 6 softball players, we don't know when our Regional 6 tournament is.
Yep, Jake, and we mentioned, yeah, we are working on finalizing that and hopefully something sooner than later on that, but we'll let you guys know as soon as we find out. So it's either going to be the second or third weekend of July. We just don't have that confirmed yet to be able to send anything out yet. So an opportunity to play softball. We're just trying to figure out the final details for you. All right. Any other OST questions? All right, then I can open it up. If anybody has any general questions, I know if anybody had questions about the upcoming swim meets or the state events that we can answer tonight. Otherwise, like I said, we'll send out some more information for some meetings leading up to the state events. Spectators and masks. Yep, we're continuing to, again, the general mask policy is that we'll be having masks unless participating. That would affect anybody on site. So volunteers, spectators, staff, all would be wearing masks at this point.
So you know how you said you were talking about indirect and direct contact? Is that just for softball and bocce, or is that for all sports?
That affects all sports. Yeah, it would be phase one for all sports. That portion of it will be removed, and so it'd be on the discretion of agency managers to figure out what type of contact they would like to have for their practices, but they could run things a little bit more closer to normal. So
Does that include team basketball in the winter time? When
yeah,
it is that season?
Mike, we're a long ways out from that, so we're hoping that
I know,
things
I
look a little
know.
bit different. So
I know, I don't want to push myself.
yep. I got a question from in the chat about state swim. Yeah, so state swim is June 27th at Carthage University or Carthage College in Kenosha. So it is confirmed there. We did a site visit. We had it's a beautiful facility. Anybody who's been out to the Southern Sectional Basketball Tournament when we used to be at Carthage, in that middle tier, if you can overlook the pool, it's a pretty impressive pool there, and we have a really good. There's a really good their SAC program is main charity of choice is Special Olympics Wisconsin, or Special Olympics in general. So that's one of those things that we can use to our advantage. But I know it's not the most, it's a little bit in the corner of the geography wise, but it was a facility that was open for us to use. They are being very helpful and very generous as far as letting us use the facility, and it's a beautiful facility, probably one of the top ones that I've seen in the state. So it's going to be a great competition there. So Carthage College, June 27th. And we'll that's the state date. Yeah, Bev.
I talked a little bit with Michaela today. You guys are keeping in mind that, you know, we can't be starting in Kenosha at 9:30 in the morning.
Yep. Yeah, and that's one of those things where I'll talk about too. So for our state events, if we're having multiple shifts, the idea is that we would schedule those based on geography. Those who are driving the shortest distance would start the earliest. So sorry for those in Region 4 who want to sleep in on track day. You're probably going to be the first shift. But we're just trying to be accommodating for those so we don't have to worry about housing on some of those things. Again, as registrations come in, if we have to do multiple shifts for swimming, the closer agencies would be first, and the ones that are driving the furthest would be later. If it's just one shift, we'd probably end up using that later time frame. And like I said, I was telling the staff before this, selfishly, I'm going to be at both state track and state swim, so I'm not super pumped about getting up at 9:30 on Sunday after being at track all day on Saturday. So we would be accommodating to people driving, and just knowing that we'd look at those time frames. So we have a set time when we can be in the pool, and that would accommodate for us not starting right away first thing in the morning for swim, for those traveling pretty distance. So.
And that would also apply down at Waukesha?
Waukesha, it depends on how that meets that's going to be run. Is that we're actually hopeful that one's going to run as closely as we have previously. And I know there's the two conflicting side of things of you want to start it later so people can get in, but we also know that as the later we start in an outdoor tournament in August, that the heat becomes a factor on those type of things. So we'd probably look at a similar schedule that we had from previous years. And again, unfortunately, with not having housing available on campus, we'd be looking at what hotel options we would have in the area that would be able to give us a deal for our group coming out.
Jason, I have a question.
Sure.
We are really struggling with getting the physicals in for softball. We're only able to just start now. So we have a week for everybody to get their physicals and get them in. Is the deadline still June 1st?
Yep. At this point, it's still June 1st.
It
Yep.
is.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Would they look at changing that at all that you know of, where we don't play until July?
It did. So there's something that came up. I mean, we did bring it up in a conversation in our meeting, and then just with some of the there's more of a time frame than just not having it till July, just because of we had a large amount of people that had physicals extended through July 1st. And so the amount of physicals coming in and the time to process it, that's part of the factor that comes into those type of things. But it's been discussed, and what was decided this week is it's remaining at June 1st from what our conversation was.
Now I have a silly question. What physicals were extended to July 1st?
Oh man, I have to pull this. I would pull it up. There was a range, and I think Sam had notified those, but there was it was within a certain, if they expired within a certain time frame because of COVID, that Special Olympics North America had recommended that you would extend those physicals to like what was it, a year and a half or 3.5 years rather, or 4 years rather than doing just the typical 3 years. But yeah, Brittany, you unmuted yourself.
I was just going to say, Sam is on the call, and I think she just unmuted herself. So I don't know, Sam, if you want to explain.
Yeah, I unmuted myself. So I don't recall off the top of my head exactly when. I think it was around November that we were notified by Special Olympics to extend medicals to July 1st. However, so somebody who expired in April, for example, who would have expired in April, was extended to July 1st. So many people were extended to July 1st only if they didn't go past 4 years. So this was done really because we weren't sure about what kinds of competitions we were going to have in the spring. So we would just allow more time for people to get medicals done. It was done with the expectation that people would still work as hard as they could to get their medicals in during the springtime. But it was decided back in early April or even late March that we would be returning to regular medical deadlines as things were opening up. And this was all communicated in a April local program update, where I pulled all the athletes and sent those to the program managers or their medical directors and said, here are the athletes that, although they don't expire technically until July 1st, they do need to get their medicals in by June 1st for outdoor sports, because at that time it had been decided we would be likely able to have an outdoor sports season, and we would be returning to June 1st. And the June 1st deadline came about, I would want to say 6 to 7 years ago, because the event registration deadlines, as Jason mentioned earlier in the meeting, is already June 23rd. So it was very difficult in years past to have a July 1st deadline for the sports directors in order to know how many athletes would be eligible. And a lot of waiting was done and last minute scrambling. So it had been changed to June 1st many years ago.
Right. And we knew that. And I do remember getting your memos. I guess we didn't know as a program if we could have softball because of availability and local requirements of fields. And so we just found out that we can, and so we're scrambling.
Right, and I do send reminders to parents, athletes, and guardians with email, so they're aware. We do our best to alleviate some of that burden, but so that's, I don't know if anybody else has any other questions on that.
Well, and Sam, I was just going to provide a little bit behind the scenes context too. I mean, we're talking, I think we were what I saw before, and maybe tell me if my number's way off, but I think it was about 2,000 medicals that we could be expecting about this time too. So we talk about
right, there were about 2,000. Yeah, there were about 2,000 athletes that were extended to July 1st. But it really was done with just the expectation that people would still be trying to get in, but with knowing that it could take a little bit longer to see their physicians. And athletes can always use previous exam dates if they have been seen within the past year or so, and their medical examiner, doctor, nurse feels comfortable using that previous exam date. I've done it for my own daughter, and usually I can get it done within a 2-day turnaround if a previous exam date. But I do realize we run into issues with group homes and things like that, but we just do the best we can do.
All right. I did get a question about scrimmage requirements for OST, if we're still requiring 2 games of scrimmage games. So I guess if it's available for you guys to get your 2 games, and I really do want to try to encourage that, because it really does make a difference for us with divisioning. That's what those scores are used for primarily for us, is that divisioning score side of things. For those, I believe there's a invitational in 5 that's normally scheduled, that's not happening this year. That we've mentioned to teams, like if you have multiple teams, please get at least 1 game in against another one of your own teams, so we can get a good idea of the skill level, the difference between your own teams. And if you're struggling to find a second game, please feel free to reach out to your athletic director. It's a weird year. I understand that. I understand there's people are getting late into the game as far as starting practices because of facility availability. I understand there's some hesitancy still in some cases for travel or intermingling with other agencies and all that type of stuff. So what I'm just saying is we want to get the 2 games in if we possibly can. If we're struggling with that, please bring that up to an athletic director or myself early on. You should know earlier, sooner than later, if there's some issues with trying to do those things. It's a little bit harder to make adjustments when somebody says, the day of registration, oh, we didn't get our games in, so just work with us or whatever it is. So if you know right now that you're not able to make it to an invitation that you normally would, and you'd be struggling to get games, please reach out to your athletic director or reach out to myself, and we'll work with you to try to make it. But we're not, I guess with that being said, we're not wiping away the 2-game scrimmage thing, but we're being flexible with those who need to be. So if that makes sense.
Jason,
Yeah.
this is Claudia from West Dallas.
Yep.
Just going back to state games for track.
Yep.
Will it be run the same way as the regional one was?
Yep, it will be. So it's going to be scheduled in stations. I know people are looking for a schedule. It really is, we're waiting on figuring out final numbers and the events they're in, because the distance events and all those type of things. But my guess right now is that we would be running it in probably 3 shifts. And again, we'd be doing where you're scheduled at a station, you'd be there for a set amount of time, 20 to 30 minutes. We'd rotate when that time frame is done or everybody is complete. And so you're on site for just, up to 2 hours, and then you'd be able to get off site. The exception of, we'd schedule you with your agency. You'd probably be combined with multiple agencies, just with numbers from each agency being smaller with quota. But the one, again, exception to that's going to be our wheelchair and our distance running athletes. To accommodate some of that, I'm trying to figure out the way to be efficient with that. We were able to be efficient with the distance runners a little bit with Region 8 meet and with the Region 4-5 meet with doing multiple shifts. So I'm looking at what our numbers are going to be to figure out when those ones will exactly be. But again, the shifts, especially for short distance runners, are going to be based on geography. So again, if you're driving multiple hours, you're more than likely going to be competing starting in the or closer to lunchtime than in the first thing in the morning. But that meet with the numbers that we have, we will have to start pretty early, or like probably around 9-ish, to get that meet done in the time frame that we have. So it will be run in stations. It will be scheduled out like it was previously. I'm anticipating 3 shifts at that one, and one of those shifts would include distance and wheelchair athletes.
Thank you, Jason.
Yep. Somebody had mentioned about About swim, do we want, if we have a couple of our swim SRTs on here, I don't know if there's any questions you guys specifically want to, or topics you specifically want to bring up for how district swim will look. I know there's a little bit difference because we have one outdoor swim meet and 2 indoor swim meets. But Nicole and Amber and Michaela are on the call, so I don't know if you guys want to touch base on any details.
Yeah, so for swimming, things will be a little bit similar to track. Depending on the size of the meet, you may be scheduled in shifts based on your agency. And then even beyond that, the heats are going to be assigned by agency rather than division. So once again, your swimmers will be competing against, in the pool, they will be racing against those on their own team. However, they will be divisioned across the meet and awarded on that. And then everybody will have a virtual award ceremony the week following the meet. Beyond that, I don't know if there's anything you guys want to touch on for your meet specifically, or if there's any questions after that. For the Region 6 meet, it is outdoor. So you can have 2 spectators per athlete. And then the other 2 meets, the Oconomowoc and the Stevens Point meet, are both indoors. So there will be no spectators allowed beyond the coaching staff. Any others?
In Region 8, though, we are looking at getting it streamed. So parents, guardians, and that can hopefully be able to see the stream. We're just gonna have to go by the day and see if it works. Because I know that the Wyas use it for a couple of their swim meets, but they've also had some issues too. So it's just going to be trial and error on that day if it's going to be successful or not. So it'll be a positive if it works.
We have a similar, we talked to the swim coach at Carthage, and it sounds like that may be a possibility as well for state swim with a no spectator event, to have some sort of, whether it's an iPad running video on Facebook Live, but some sort of stream, low tech or high tech, whatever it would be. They seem that would be a possibility for us too. So that's one of those things that we're looking at for that.
So Kathy, for the Northern District, we're gonna start warm up from 10 to 10:30, and then the meet will start at 10:45, and everyone's gonna swim at the same time. We're only gonna have 1 shift. With the increase of having 100 people for indoors, with there being 50 athletes, we feel it's feasible to have 1 shift. So we're gonna start at 10:45, and the schedule is the same schedule that's in the rules for the order of events, and then it should be done around 1:30. Hopefully that helps.
And I'll make the point that we will run that same schedule at all our meets, and that was just a way for you guys to make decisions on how many athletes would be swimming in back-to-back heats or events, with the caveat of knowing that there may be some events that people don't register for, especially in some of our lower numbered competitions. So if that's the case, it would be a meet manager's decision. If we need to take a little bit of a break to give an athlete a breather or something like that, we'll do our best. But with these meets being smaller, if you're used to a 150 person meet and going through all our events, and you bump it down to 20 or 30 people, the events are going to come up quicker than you normally would in a 150 person meet. So it's going to be kind of it's going to be up to coaches and the meet manager to really be on the same page for trying to make sure that we're getting the meet done efficiently, but also not making somebody so they're constantly in the pool on some of those things too. So I will also mention that I believe this is the case at all our meets, but I know 2 and 8, it sounds like this will be that with the ones without spectators, we're going to be utilizing a lot of like the bleachers in the pool area as a hangout area for our swimmers as they wait between that. So you will be in the competition area rather than being in the gym space per se. And then staging maybe, in a different section of the bleachers just to try to use the space efficiently, and we're not spread out as much doing that as much too. So each meet will have their specific information. I don't mean to promise things in those 2 meets that I don't know the information for, but generally I know I've been working with Michaela in the UW Stevens Point meet that we wouldn't be in the big field house that we normally are for staging. The staging is actually going to take place in the pool area because we don't have to worry about spectators being in there as well. So.
And then
Region 8 is going to be sorry.
Go ahead, Amber.
Region 8 is going to be the same way. It's going to be staged in the pool area, and we are not utilizing the gym at all.
And then for state, it's going to be a pretty quick turnaround from some of those meets to registration. So quota will be announced before the meets, and similar to track, athletes that advance to state will be able to swim in any race that they placed in. It does not have to be first, second, third. Am I right on that, right? You nod your head, yes,
Yep,
okay.
yes.
Um,
And again, that's a adaptation that we're making for 2021, just with the way the meets are run and the way the numbers are coming in. We can accommodate people swimming in all their events this year. Where at the large scale summer games, we had to cut back on some of those things. Just we're trying to be try to benefit the athletes in a situation where we can. I got a question about lunch provided at state competitions. From Bev, no, we won't be providing lunches at state swim and state track. Unfortunately, again, from a budgetary reason. We also, again, we're scheduling people for shorter periods of time at those meets. So again, at track, you'd be there for 2 hours, and at swim would be about that same time frame. So you're not going to be stuck at a track all day for an individual athlete per se. Maybe a coach would be if they had to be multiple shifts, maybe there for a little bit longer. But from that standpoint, that's unfortunate for this year, but the plan is to add that back in 2022 and get back to a normal from the state game perspective on that too. Bob Ziegler had asked, when is the next coaches meeting? And I apologize, I didn't have that on the calendar. It'd be in August, as we're going to be talking about our fall sports season. I will get that out. I'll have to dig through what August looks like and get that out for you. It will probably be the third or fourth week of August for the next coaches meeting to discuss fall, but I will send that out to everybody on the coaches meeting email chain to let people know, and we'll also include that on the event calendar and that stuff. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that came up in the chat here.
Is Michaela on?
I sure am.
I'll call you tomorrow.
Sounds good, Mike.
Perfect. I would say if anybody else has any other questions, otherwise, everybody, thank you for joining us.
I do see one from Mary. Mary, can you send me an email tomorrow with those athlete names? And I'll look them up, because it definitely shouldn't say 5 of 3021 unless that was a typo. If it's 5 2021, but yes, even if so, we just extended to July 1st. That was just based on what Special Olympics Inc. told us what to do last November, not really knowing what kind of season were we going to have. They just wanted people extended to July 1st if they were eligible to be extended to July 1st. So I realized that a lot of people expired July 1st, but given that we are back to, for the most part, normal sports seasons, we are then back to normal deadlines. So just basically treat it like as if an athlete already just had a July 1st deadline to begin with, whether they were extended or not. They would always still need to be, just like any athlete who expires in the middle of fall sports season or in the middle of winter game season. Even if they expire in the middle of the season, they need to get their new medical in by that season's deadline date. So these athletes still need to get their medical in by June 1st, just as if an athlete expired November 1st during bowling season. Even though they wouldn't expire till November 1st, they still need to get their new medical in by October 1st so that they can stay eligible all the way through the season. I don't know if that kind of helps clarify it, but it's just basically treating all these athletes. Yes, they did get their medical deadlines expirations extended, but now they expire in the middle of a season. Now we're back to normal sports seasons, so they need to get it in by that season's expiration date. And I'm sorry I'm not on video, everybody. I had my second COVID shot late yesterday afternoon, and I'm just feeling terrible. So I am at home and in bed right now, but I am still working. I am still answering emails. I'm still processing a lot of medicals coming in, so I'm just trying to do my best here. But I just want to apologize for not being on video. So, but if you have any questions, just email me. I'm still working and on email. So
Well, thanks for being a trooper there, Sam, and jumping on this when you're not feeling
Yeah,
great.
no
So,
problem.
Christy had asked about estimate on fees for state. All our state games fees are $10 and it's only be charged per athlete. We're not doing per delegate like we had previously done. And that's been pretty standard for single day state events where we haven't provided food, is that we would just charge per athlete. Similar events have that, in the past would have been like state bowling where we hadn't had some of those things. So $10 per athlete, not per delegate. So you don't have to worry about paying a fee for coaches coming on site. All right. Anything else?
Think we're good.
All right. Well, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, the athletic directors, or the COVID@SpecialOlympicsWisconsin.org email. I appreciate you guys taking the time and going a little bit over tonight, going through all this stuff. We're excited that we were excited to see athletes at our track events. We're excited to see them at the upcoming swim events. We're excited to see everybody as we get outdoors. So thank you guys, and we appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you. Thanks, everybody.